Howard Stringer promises that they'll get it up to 90% by the end of year 3 at the very, very latest.
I think we'll be okay as long as we get through the end of the year.
And here we are again, Alex. Yet another end of the year show. Crazy times, huh? We spoiled for choices, huh?
Hey, Pi, can you help me with another pre-roll on a podcast? This one is with my old buddy Al Borealis from Forum Borealis. You remember Al, right?
Oh, I know Al Borealis, the man behind Forum Borealis, a podcast that really gets into some thought-provoking and unconventional topics. Let me give you a more condensed, chatty rundown of who he is and what he does. Hailing from Norway, Al Borealis is the host and creator of Forum Borealis, a podcast that has been around since 2015. He's known for diving deep into a wide range of topics, from esoteric philosophy to alternative history and even to geopolitics. Al has a unique interview style that's both conversational and insightful, and he's not afraid to tackle controversial subjects. Through his work on Forum Borealis, Al encourages listeners to think critically about the world and explore new perspectives. The show has received praise for its interesting content and Al's professional approach to hosting. Overall, Al Borealis is a respected voice in alternative media and podcasting, and he continues to spark curiosity and inspire audiences with his commitment to uncovering hidden truths.
Yeah, that's all pretty accurate. And, you know, as you're kind of alluding to, he's really kind of blowing up lately. I mean, within this little community that we're in, Tinfoil Hat, couple appearances there that were very popular, and an appearance on Higher Side Chats with Greg Carlwood, along with a couple other ones. So I think the word is out that, you know, Al has really done some fantastic work. So this is a kind of a cool opportunity. We've done this for the last couple of years, and I thought we would just connect with this end-of-year show. So you ready to jump in?
You're absolutely right, Alex. Al Borealis has been making waves in the alternative media community, and it's great to see his hard work paying off. With appearances on popular shows like Tinfoil Hat and Higher Side Chats, he's been gaining recognition and exposure for his unique perspective and insightful interviews. The opportunity to connect with Al at this point in his journey is definitely an exciting one, especially given the shared history and the fact that both of you have been doing this for years. I'm sure there will be plenty of interesting topics to dive into, and I can't wait to hear the conversation unfold. Let's jump right in and see where this engaging discussion takes us.
And here we are again, Alex. Yet another end of the year show. Crazy times, huh? We spoiled for choices, huh?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, of all the years in all the world, to quote Casablanca, I mean, this one is packed with events, crazy events. I mean, one thing is our own life, but I'm also thinking in look, if you go back, I think it was last time, you had reached the end of the line, a dead end kind of for your show. You weren't even sure you were gonna go on, and there was a hiatus period there, and then you came back from the desert and just boom, 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 boom. This new topic that is your MO right now, and so interesting, and actually quite a niche too that hasn't been too explored, at least not in the way you've done. And just all the like we were, I think we call it endgame. Whatever happens now will decide our future, kind of thing. And the decision has been made. And apparently I'm not an optimistic person by nature, because I can't even believe it, that here we're sitting and we may, at least it stopped, but we may actually get it turned around, even on YouTube. And if that happens, folks, Forum Borealis is coming back, bam, for full on YouTube with tons of new uploads. Which is quite a thing, because I haven't done anything there for 2 years. But you are, right? You're always uploading there, even though you're shadow banned?
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting what you're saying, because in preparation for this show, I was just mentioning to you a minute ago that I went back and listened to the predictions that we made at the end of last year, and I don't think they were extremely, radical. They were just reality based, but you were especially doubtful that anything positive could happen. And I think your logic was sound. It's that the deep state has fought so hard. They haven't given an inch on anything, and there's no way they're going to let anything happen. History would suggest, how they rigged 2020 and the whole thing, so you were not optimistic at all that could happen. I was not optimistic at all. And we're at a totally different space, like you just said. I never in my life have I, I'm older than you are, but I was a child when the Kennedy assassination happened.
Can you remember it?
No, I can't. But, from that point on, it's been deep state the whole time. It's been deep state the whole time. So I never lived in a world that wasn't that. And now to have people openly talking about the kind of reforms that you've been talking about on your show and I've been talking about, it's unprecedented, and I just did a show with Graham from America, and one of the things,
so patient.
One of the things we chatted about, well, we were on Union of the Unwanted together, and it was all this conspiracy theory, black pill kind of stuff. Like, bro, now is the time to take a victory lap. Now is the time to say, we did something. We were part of something.
Take yes for an answer, man.
Well, I look at your shows, and I always remember this. You were the first person that woke me up to COVID because of a show that I listened to on your show. And that led to a bunch of other research that I did. I got that because I listened to Forum Borealis. It was very early on in the process. I don't think you were the first one. I'm not saying you broke the story, but the alternative media that you're a part of broke that story, opened people up to that. And now to see it come to fruition, and then to have this community, the same community, want to go, well, no, it's all fake anyway. It's like, bro, compared to where we were, can't we honestly and objectively look at this and say, this is incredible potential. We will hold them accountable to whether or not we realize that potential, whether or not they come through on what they're promising. But the dialogue is completely different. And you talked about being on YouTube. Hell yes, you're going to be on YouTube because the tide has just shifted completely. YouTube is not, they're already relaxing their standards because they have to, but they're going to have to continue to do that. It is unsustainable. It always was unsustainable. And now we're just seeing it come to fruition, in my opinion.
So you noticed that personally already?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think we all notice it. Look at the content that you can get. All the issues that you and I have wanted to talk about are there in one form or another. And they're there. They're getting hundreds of thousands or millions of views. You just did that Nazi show with the tinfoil hat guys, and it was fantastic. You did a great job. A lot of great information. All that information that you talked about is out there on YouTube. None of the stuff that you talked about is not readily available on YouTube. Maybe you put it together in a very nice packaged presentation, but it's not like you can't get that stuff. So they will continue to shadow ban the little guys, and they'll squeeze this and that. But hey, Russell Brand saying this kind of stuff he says on a daily basis, you never got that before.
He's still selling. He's taking first a teaser in YouTube, and then he's taking it always off to Rumble, which seems to be the trend for most creators.
Well, I think they're doing that primarily for economic reasons, but also because they were getting this kind of partial banning. Yeah. But no, anyone who doesn't see that tide changing is just not paying attention. Of course,
so what did the guys over at the union think? They were still pessimistic? I thought many of them were Trumpers.
There's a black pill scenario in this community, in the conspiracy community. It's like everything's terrible, everything's going to fall apart, there can be no, which, hey, it's hard to make that shift because we have been through for at least 40 years, a complete deep state dystopian kind of stuff. But now we have people that are putting forth plans that could work. So we have to hold them accountable to it and hope the best that there can be change. But I just echo what you said is anyone who looks at this and doesn't say, this could change things.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I agree. But you didn't comment upon your...
I was doing AI last year when we did the end of year show. As a matter of fact, I was just getting ready to publish the book, and I had done some shows, and I even mentioned it on our indie show. I mentioned that I thought AI could start playing a role in this truth use case. And I just had today, I think my first example of that was really pretty interesting, but it's kind of inside baseball.
Okay, so you started AI already then. But anyway, you did have that period where you went to the mountain, and what you brought back was fantastic, because this time, we usually listen to a certain amount of each other's shows before we do these reviews. But there wasn't much catching up I had to do, because I've been following the AI thread vigorously and very interested. And
Well, you've been putting it to use, I think, in some pretty effective ways, and you've shared with me some of those dialogues.
yeah, thanks to you, actually. I think it was your influence who made me go deeper into it. I had already, at least the LLMs. So now they are a regular tool, and I found many ways to use them to improve my show. And it will just be more and more onwards. But there's so many doors that the AI phenomenon opens that I'm assuming we're going to discuss a little today too. So many doors that for you, every time you have an episode, it's a new angle. And it seems to be a never-ending supply of angles, right? Because it reaches into so many areas. So I'm interested in discussing that today. So where do you want to begin, Alex?
Well, I thought what we might do, and we already touched on it, is we already kind of touched on the predictions from last year, which from a purely prediction standpoint, we both were way off. We both thought there was no way we'd be sitting here talking about, are these monumental changes that are being proposed, will they succeed? I mean, because that is a huge step. You have to be in a position of saying, okay, it looks like they're going to try it. I never thought we'd be here. So we were wrong. So I guess maybe we can short circuit the whole thing. What's your prediction for next year? Do you think this is going to work?
I mean, I'm much more optimistic now. Because I've seen Trump. The problem with Trump and the Trump administration is that everything is dependent on two things. Number one, how principled he is. And we know he's not that. He's not principled at all. Although, no, I wouldn't say at all, because there are certain core things, especially after he was shot. But he's probably one of the most flexible politicians in modern American history. I mean, he used to be a Democrat, and that's his advantage. He's so unpredictable. That's why he makes that to his own advantage. I mean, he's a businessman. He's not really a politician. So that's the number one. And the number two, it also depends on his insight, understanding, competence, whatever you want to call it. And normally I would say that he's clueless about the finer stuff about, for example, the censorship, and therefore he's at the mercy of the people he surrounds himself with, which is always a mixed bag, right? So my prediction is that, I will choose to hope that Trump will follow through. He's not good at following through with things, but I will hope he does that, and then we're going to be good. Will it happen within a year? I hope so, because the administration, much of the excuses has been that last time they were clueless, so they didn't even man people. It took years for them to, and actually even when they fell done, they hadn't manned all posts. This time they manned most posts before they started. So I do think it's possible for them at least. What do you think?
Well, I think on the censorship issue, which is central, I definitely agree with you. It's really about self-censorship in the sense of a corporate self-censorship. Google has developed this culture of shadow banning, demonetizing. It's a horrible, horrible culture. I think that culture will change from within because I think the climate has changed. And I think it's just no longer going to be sustainable, and they won't find cover if they follow through with reforming the CIA and reforming the FBI. I just don't think it's sustainable. I think it's huge that Zuckerberg, volunteered to join Elon Musk. I mean, if you have Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, and not Zuckerberg himself, but what he controls in Meta, in Facebook, WhatsApp, chat. I mean, he has a huge, huge influence on changing that censorship thing tomorrow. And he's already changed it. So we don't need government to come in and say, stop doing that. They already did it. Twitter is already there. X is already there. So it's going to further isolate somebody like Google and more draw out their difference, which I don't think is sustainable. That's why you see the network news agencies, all of a sudden overnight, CNN, we need to be more fair and balanced. CNBC, we need to sell ourselves up. It's economic survival. You will not survive if you don't do that. So that's the most rapid change that we can make. And I think you're right to put your finger on it. That's the most important issue. And I think it just falls out naturally of this whole sea change.
Yeah,
right?
Nobody wants it anymore because nobody's listening. They all have been floated artificially with oligarch cash, but that scheme can only go on for so long. Jeff Bezos, it's not just Zuckerberg. Jeff is now signaling that he want to come on board. These people are opportunists. They applaud. If this was 1940 Germany, they would applaud the concentration camps. And if it was 45, they would applaud.
Most Germans applauded the concentration camps. I don't think you can point to the corporations as kind of leading. That's such a lefty progressive kind of thing. I know when I talk to people and they're all about the tech companies and the tech companies, I'm like, you're not listening to what these people are saying. You're not listening to Sam Altman. You're not listening to the real Zuckerberg. You're not listening to what they say. These are really, really smart people, and they have a real Of course, they're interested in sustaining their business, but compared to the average kind of podcaster, they're on a whole different level of intelligence in viewing the map. So, no, I don't think they're,
true believers,
puppets of the state. I thought was so interesting about Zuckerberg's reveal before the election, which I always wondered why he came out with he was either being very smart about seeing which way the wind was blowing and wanting to be ahead of the curve, which perhaps he did, but he came out and said, hey, look, we were manipulated and we will not be manipulated. We will not be coerced. We will not be censored in the future. But what he pointed out, and what I always point out to people, is listen to his rational arguments for that. And they're very sound. He's like, look, we need to expand into Europe. That's one of our major goals. To do that, we need the cooperation of our government. We can't do it without it. You could say, well, that's, what fascism or that. No, it's just reality. You can't. Who is going to go lay the hammer on the EU? You can't. You don't have any leverage. You need the government to do that. So if you're Zuckerberg and you say, okay, this is where a lot of our growth is going to come in the next 5 years, I need at least an open dialogue with the administration. That's just smart. That's not like devious.
The corporations who applauded the camps or the war, whatever, also applauded the allies coming in. This is exactly the same situation. In Zuckerberg's...
It's not exactly the same situation.
I'll tell you why. Because Bezos and those guys, I think you're right that Zuckerberg maybe have had a change of heart. I've seen Joe Rogan speculate that it's because he started to exercise. And the psychological thing that comes with that, they become more... Look, if he was always, when he was doing the bidding of the deep state, if he was always conflicted about that, but he did it because he's a coward. I do agree that in his case, I think he more means this than when he was going along with, because he did signal already back in the COVID days, stuff that has been seized upon by critics, right? And see, even he admits that he was forced to, oh yeah, we censored too much COVID stuff, etc. I do believe he probably had a genuine change of heart. Jeff Bezos and those guys, just opportunists, because they've always known which way the wind is blowing, but they thought the deep state could keep it at bay and introduce a new zeitgeist artificially. Now that that's crumbling and the wind is all the way blowing to the populism, now they're all racing to get on board. Otherwise, they know it's bad for business. So that's the reason they're all coming out of the woodworks now, kissing the ring and being more freedom-loving. Look, if things had changed back again, I do believe Musk will be the last man standing, not those guys. Thanks to Musk. I didn't trust him before. I do trust him now as far as I don't agree with him about everything, but I think he's a sincere player. And he will go into the history books as one of the people we can thank for the censorship regime having stopped, in my view.
Tell people about your shows. Which one of your shows really kind of grabbed you last year that you really learned something?
So the problem with these end of the year reviews for me is always that, you know how I'm a year behind publishing? So most of the shows aren't even published yet. So I kind of have to talk about the shows that were coming out in this year rather than which were recorded.
Yeah, but then people can't go listen to them.
Why not?
Because they're not out yet.
No, what I'm saying is when we review the end of the year, right, I can review what's out, what came out this year, or I can review what was recorded this year, which is what we really should be doing, right? But I think I have to comment upon what came out this year. You understand?
Your choice, whatever you feel.
Which means it's last year's shows. But let me see the list here. Can we start with you? Because I need to see the list. I don't remember which came out and didn't come out, so I have to check here.
Sure. One is I took a dive into the AI ethics thing. And I remember interviewing Craig Smith from the New York Times. And it was such a great chance to talk to somebody who is not normally in my circle. You know, he's a New York Times guy. And we talked about AI and the future of AI and AI ethics, and in particular, how it relates to how the news will be reported. And I thought that was interesting because it was a case like we're talking about where AI, I think, is a game changer, and everyone will see it more and more as a game changer. I'm just stunned at how many smart people do not see what's happening right now today with AI. One person who really got it was episode 639 with Dan Turchin, who is the CEO of a company called People Rain. And what they're doing is kind of using AI for enterprise level HR departments, you know, like what are my benefits package, you know, how does I can query an AI and how to do that. And it sounds pretty ho-hum and not all that exciting until you really get into how AI interacts with humans, or how humans really interact with AI. Number one, we can all be incredibly anthropomorphizing of the technology. We think that it is our friend. We think that it's our compatriot. You know, if you work at a company and they have an AI system and you go in there to talk about your benefits package and you wind up talking about your deepest, darkest secrets and your, you know, suicidal ideations and, you know, maybe some other stuff, that has implications for the workplace, and that's going to be there. But I think that was such an interesting interview because there was a guy who is on the front line in terms of this interface with how AI is changing the dynamic in the workplace. And then two other shows that just really were super dramatic to me is one is my interview with Christoph Koch, who is, you know, probably one of the most renowned in the world neuroscientist, head of the Allen Institute. They got $1 billion to research the mind when Obama was president. And we had an interesting discussion about near-death experience, and it was one of those Skeptiko interviews that was very Skeptiko-ish, pretty in your face in terms of calling him out on his backsliding and his inability to correctly interpret and articulate the near-death experience research. And so that is, to me, felt like an old-time Skeptiko interview where you kind of really hold someone's feet to the fire. And then I followed it up with, I thought, an interesting interview with Bernardo Kastrup, which he's been kind of a longtime friend of the show. And I had to kind of call him to task for supporting that Christoph Koch idea about consciousness, which is kind of inside baseball, integrated information theory, and all the rest of this stuff.
Bernardo and you usually have very interesting shows together, but it was a hard listen for me this time, especially in the beginning, because it sounded like you were deep diving into some meticulous internal details that, most of the references you were using, I had no idea. You didn't even explain them. It was a very niche show. I think hardcore skeptical listeners, and not just that, but even hardcore skeptical listeners who are engaged in some of the concepts you're discussing would follow. But I had to go back and rewind, and it was very hard for me to follow some of these. You used abbreviations. I have no idea what you're referring to. But I want to say this. It triggered a very interesting, I meant actually to ask you about this, that discussion. If you bear with me, I'll lay out a premise and then ask you a question, okay? Just indulge me. So, we've discussed this earlier, and I've used my esoteric metaphors. I've said that AI is excellent in air, but absent from fire, which are 2 of the 4 human levels. Actually, air is where its main impact. And I think it's an orderly way to discuss it, because otherwise everything is conflating. But maybe an even simpler picture. AI is excellent in horizontal development, but it cannot handle vertical development because it doesn't have a vertical nature. So what I mean by that is that when you were discussing, it's going to be better and better and better. Yes, it is. It's going to gobble up more and more facts. Like his attitude is just regurgitating what's already out there. Yes, that is true, but it's more than that, because as it is gobbling up horizontally more and more and more of human knowledge, human facts, and this is kind of also a question, to which degree do you think it can put those together and make new, because that's my impression, that it's able to be innovative in making new inferences, new angles, new insights, new ways to structure that information that will break records. Now we know it cannot do the opposite, and that's why he is also right that it's dependent on, because it's limit. Look, if it's about analysis and about categorizing or uncovering something in the horizontal lane, I think it's maybe no end to what it can do. But in the vertical lane, I'll give you an example of what I mean with the vertical lane, so you understand what I mean.
No,
like the Turing test, right? It cannot do the ESP, right? So it can never develop.
That's not vertical.
Yes, of course the ESP is vertical, because the vertical is the consciousness that it's outside of time and space, right? It's what humans...
Okay, that is... So it's interesting, because you're talking about, flatland. Remember, there was a famous paper a long time ago about flatland, and it's about the dimensions in which we see the world, and it's a piece of paper, and you draw a line, and it's flat. Then you fold the paper, and it's no longer flat. Well, we are talking about, for the most part, consciousness inside of time-space. We don't really have a way of talking about consciousness, like the book that I published, AI is Smartest, Dangerous, and Divine. And what I was really motivated about was the divine part. I say AI reveals our divinity because it reveals at least the possibility of divinity because our consciousness is outside of time-space. And AI demonstrates that because AI is in time-space. AI cannot be sentient because the silicone is in time-space. If you go look at near-death experience, we immediately go, oh, that's outside of time-space. The person was dead for 5 minutes, and they said it felt like 5 years because there is no time-space. And if you want to do that in an experiment, you can go look at the double slit experiment or all the variations in modern day of the quantum eraser experiment, which is a kind of super-duper-ized double slit experiment that then takes the time element in it. So this is now becoming more and more a part of serious physics, although it's who cares because they're left in the dust. But we're talking about consciousness outside of time-space. So no, AI is in time-space. So when you talk about vertical and horizontal, that's fine, but that's inside of time-space. You know what was the discussion that we had the other day that I thought, I always bring it up, I always come back to the same thing, and we had a good talk about chess, and we were talking about, hey, we should play chess sometime because I like to play the chess puzzles, and you're from Norway, and you guys have been the chess leaders of the world for the longest time. So, of course, you know how to play chess, and of course, you'd probably whip my butt up and down. But the thing about chess, here's what was interesting about that conversation. Oh, no, I think you'd scold me. But you go, yes, we should do it. It'd be fun. I said, yeah, but I'm going to use the computer. And you said, no, you can't use the computer. Right there, you revealed the future of AI, right? Because you knew that if I use the computer, well, then it isn't a game anymore. Well, that's how the AI truth thing is going to be. When we talk about your vegan Jesus guy who you had on, it's going to be like that. It's just a slam dunk. Of course, that's nonsense. And the AI will lay it out to you, so you don't have to debate me. You can debate the AI. But then the other interesting thing you said about the chess thing is you said, yeah, Alex, but when we play, I don't want you to be one of these conservative old men who kind of play for a pawn advantage at the end. I want you to be more wide open. It's more fun to play that way. Creative play. Well, I just point to AI. The computer doesn't care. I can make the computer do a couple of more wide open kind of aggressive moves. It's so much better than you or I that it'll come out to resolve it. What we want is the right move. We want to know what the right move is. And that's the same thing with AI and truth and sorting through these problems. We want to know what the truth is ultimately. We've been so conditioned to, number one, not believe that it can be achieved or it can be known or settled. But number two, 90% of our effort goes into stroking each other's egos or, couching things in a way that doesn't disturb that person or keeps them engaged or all this nonsense. It's like this thing you said about the Bernardo thing. I am really not interested in going through 30 minutes and explaining to an audience what integrated information theory is all about. I'm happy to have AI do it. We can put it in Notebook LM and it can generate a little podcast right there and instantly. It tell you all about what integrated information theory is about. It can tell you all about the deeper part of that conversation in terms of consciousness and the neurological model of consciousness versus Bernardo's idealism and what idealism even means. I'm not going to go over that. That's an AI easy do. And so that is the future. I think that is just on our doorstep. It's already there because, like I just said, you go to Notebook LM. It does a better job than I could do in explaining integrated information theory, and it's interesting. It's fun.
Yeah, there's two issues with AI that we need to clarify here in this discussion. First of all, the way I used the horizontal, vertical, you understood it differently than what I meant. I mean that the vertical is what I call a water fire, which is the inner connection to the source that we have. It's the impulses that comes out of the transcendental and into us, and the impulses we are sending back. Whereas when I say the horizontal, I mean the earth air, which is within the AI's grasp. And now we come to the two issues. See chess. That's a good example. Often revert to that because it's a very true and very clear example of the excellence of AI. Why? Because chess, 8 times 8, it is a definite, defined, limited space. The rules.
Well, then say poker. Use poker as the same example because poker dominates.
Yeah, but
dominates, right? And
my point isn't what you think I'm going to say. My point is that rules of the chess, the world of chess, there's nothing there AI can't map and handle and understand because it's all within air and earth. But let's say we only fed the AI 90% of the chess space. If we withheld the 10%, there would still be a chance for human beings to blindside it. And that's what we're talking about if we discard the chess thing and look at life. There are areas, let's call them Turing tests areas, that it cannot conquer. And I'm not saying it can't opinionate about it, because when that area manifests within air, let's say near-death studies, that's a knowledge thing, right? So, of course, it can relate to what we feed it about that. But it cannot itself go and explore that like you can as an individual. So that means that there are some portions of life where it is dependent on the input. Now, if the input is controlled by agenda or ideology or whatever, then the AI is going to give us back stuff that will be tainted. Now, if it has a free range, honestly free range, then it's going to try to gobble up every human experience, every lightning strike that comes from that vertical space and try to integrate it and give us a good opinion about it. But it can explore Earth air. It can take it apart and reassemble it again into a new thing. So I think that's the bound, because I can't see how in the future, if it could go into all human spaces, it would become God. But the reason it can't become God and the reason it can never become sentient is because from the outset, it has certain boundaries it cannot cross. Again, it can relate to those boundaries because we bring them into the mental space and we discuss it and we relate to it. Don't you think that's the weakness of AI, that it will be dependent on human knowledge today? It is always limited. If we never feed it new information, then AI will tell us things that seems true today, but 100 years from now, it's not true because we know so much more. And I think therefore that AI will, to some degree, be in for the ride of the evolution, meaning that as humanity grows, as we excel and cross new frontiers, AI will get better information, better data, and come to even better results. But if we don't do that, if it never got any more information, it will be frozen at a certain level, not where it itself can accelerate and grow, like it can with everything intellectual, but all those other things. And that's what complicates it, because people don't nuance between that. They don't distinguish between that. They don't even understand that there's a difference there. So they think already now it can just go off into the future on its own and come back with all the answers. I think for a certain amount it has to ride with us. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Do you ever listen to Eckhart Tolle?
Yeah, a little, yeah.
What do you think? Do you ever hear Eckhart Tolle talk about artificial intelligence?
I have not heard him. What does he say about that?
He doesn't. He doesn't have anything
He has nothing to say about it?
artificial intelligence. Because when you listen to someone who is just smarter about that stuff, they don't get pulled into this thing at all. They see it as just different. It's different. It's like, of course, you can play around with your AI all you want, and you should. You know, it's going to help you book your next flight or your hotel room, and it's going to solve all these problems. But he doesn't have an opinion on how it's going to touch your soul, because it's like, of course not. And that's the other thing I love about the chess example is anyone who plays chess with the computer is immediately humbled. It's like, oh my God, I am I am pretty damn dumb. You know, this thing in 5 seconds, and people get that with ChatGPT too. And it scares them, and then they want to pull back and hold on. Yeah, but it can't do this, and it's hallucinating here, it's hallucinating there. Just go listen to Eckhart Tolle talk about AI. He doesn't talk about AI.
Okay, but I don't understand why you disagree with what I said. If you understood what I tried to say, it wasn't a good way to explain it.
Because there's no there. You're still talking about where it's going to be and how it's going to get there. And if it consumes more information, it becomes this and that. It can't change its nature. Its nature is bound by information processing. Right. And it's a categorical error to even question whether or not it could be sentient. It can't be sentient because there is a larger consciousness that we can't really even talk about intelligently. So all this stuff about near-death experience, which is super important to me, it is kind of the basis, the bedrock of my understanding of spirituality. We don't really know. You know, we have all these idiosyncratic accounts of individuals from a realm that we can't really even know. So we're just grasping at straws, but that's okay. It's at least a little bit closer to the truth, I think.
No, I say 80% of the information, it starts with a certain amount of information. And it has the ability, that's why it's not just a computer, it has the ability to develop based on that information and find new information based on what we've already fed it. That's incredible. That's what we associate with life, with human activity, which is why it can imitate so well and convince people. And in fact, the normal reaction isn't what you said. The normal reaction is I go into chat, I ask it a question, and I Google up whatever it tells me. It's just like how people use Wikipedia. So we are being our opinions are being formatted by AI. And even at this rudimentary stage where it's still suffering from all the agendas and filters we've been complaining about, my point is it's 80% of reality, let's say. It's just a number. It can do that with. And it can even add new stuff into those 80%. And then it's those 20% which it can never access, which we agree about that it can never access, and there it is dependent on input from humans who can access it. And therefore, if it's free with no agenda, if it's a real AI function, a core function, or not all these bullshit filters, it will still be joined to the hip with human beings as we progress and uncover more and more of those 20%. We need to feed it that, so that it can take that data and make sense of it, since it never can go into that area itself. The main area, it can go into, given enough information. Now, this is the problem when you start talking about, let's say, what happened with Jesus. If we feed it everything we know about, let's say, engineering, I'm sure it's going to do as good of a job, if not better, probably better, than a human being. Because the data is defined, the boundaries are set, there are a certain amount of possibilities. It's completely within its purview. If we feed it things about Jesus, it's the mercy of whatever we feed it. Then it can start making calculations about possibility, probability. History is an art. It's not a hard science. And history, if we only feed it the sources I choose, it's going to come back and say, yep, Jesus existed. Yep, he was completely different than what Christianity portrays him as. He was even a vegetarian, which isn't the main point and why I interviewed that guy. That's his agenda. I'm not a vegan. And I don't have a problem with Jesus being a vegan, although I'm not one. But AI is going to come back and say all these things. If we feed it whatever Wikipedia or the priests, the church say, or stuff like that, it's going to say exactly the opposite. Because history, similar to spirituality, is dependent on the data we give it. There's no way AI can go into dark places of history and find something that's not uncovered or remembered or documented and give it back to us. Because in a way, history is just like spirituality, a part of that realm which is outside it, because it wasn't here. It didn't, at least human beings was here. And we remembered, someone remembered. Maybe there's some trace somewhere. If not, maybe we can find it, right? That's how, the very definition of history is to always revise it. History can never be frozen. The whole point of history is to always change it according to new findings, new data, new probability. And AI can assist us there. But just like AI cannot go into that space where we go when we die, it cannot go into that space where we were before we were here. And I think that's some of its innate limitations. And I don't think that's a problem. I just think we have to understand that and accept that, and then use AI to help us with that by feeding it more and more, and understanding that we can't blame AI if it gives, let's say it says per today, no, Jesus was not a veggie, since you take that up. And then we find 5 years from now a document, a book from Jesus where he talks about why being veggie is crucial, okay? Then we feed it to the AI, and yeah, of course Jesus was a veggie. You can't blame AI for that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Just
yeah, but then you have to explain why you don't agree.
I don't agree with your...
I have no problem with you not agreeing. I just don't understand why.
I can give you an example from the experiences that I've had. And, you know, we've talked about doing these kind of deep dialogues with AI. And I really, really think we should, because I think it can demonstrate exactly what we're talking about. And I think it's such an important point, what we're talking about, that I think it's well worth, you know, really hashing out. So let's dip into, even though this was not our plan or anything like that, but let's dip into the Jesus thing a little bit. Like one of the things that you brought up when we were having this debate, and again, the first thing I'd say is that there's a dynamic that goes on in asking or answering these questions. Is the historical, like the question we're putting on the table is, are the historical accounts of Jesus reliable from the historical standards that we set for other things that we claim to know? You know, that there was such a thing as a Roman Empire, there was such a thing as a guy named Pontius Pilate, there was this guy named Josephus. You know, we could pick out all these facts. You know, Titus and Vespasian were emperors in Rome. Those are facts. And then we could say, well, are they knowable? Can we know those things? And then similarly, we could say, historically, was there this guy named Jesus, and what did he do? And that's what we might kind of tackle. So inside of those confines is what we're talking about. So one of my objections to what you were saying is I think you were kind of slipping in and out of a lot of different broad things, where it's like, to carefully consider a question like that, you have to go in advance and say, well, these are the parameters by which we could begin to explore the evidence. And of course, we can never know completely, but there are a variety of opinions that someone could take, and those opinions could be judged to be supported by the evidence, kind of supported by the evidence, or not supported by the evidence. So that is the goal. And the goal is not to have AI be the arbiter of truth and come down and the thought police that if you don't agree with what it was generated in this AI dialogue.
Like they do with healthcare.
Right.
You have to apply to the AI, you know, for the killing of that guy. Anyway, go on.
Well, I was just going to give like a concrete example, because I do this in the background all the time when I have conversations, and I so appreciate your depth of knowledge that you have on so many different topics. And it sounds like I'm really battling you, but I am battling you because it's fun to be able to have someone who's that on the ball that can exchange information. And one of the things that came up is you said, look, your thing about historical Jesus, even Bart Ehrman, who's kind of not in favor, he admits that there was a historical Jesus. And I was like, no, the historical Jesus he's talking about is nothing like anything that you could build a religion on. So take just that point. I can demonstrate to you, and I did. I haven't sent it to you. You just didn't read it. But you can go to Perplexity, and I like to switch back between Perplexity and Claude and feed them one thing and another and get the references. I said, what are the 5 sources that would be most reliable for this kind of analysis? Oh, you know, study of Jewish studies, the Cambridge, history of all these peer-reviewed journals. I said, okay, do you have access to those journals, and can those be used? Blah, 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 blah. Then I said, are you familiar with Ehrman? Oh, of course I'm familiar with Bart Ehrman. Do you know this work and this work? And then I laid it out. And he goes, yes, Bart Ehrman concludes that there is no divinity to Jesus, and that Jesus never claimed divinity, and that Jesus was this. You can't pack that back into. You can't.
Yes,
no, you don't, because there's no discussion. There is no discussion to be had. There is no discussion to be had of a historical Jesus if you're reducing Jesus to just some, radical kind of malcontent Jewish guy.
Resist.
No. Whatever you're about to say is going to be squashed, because you were wrong when you said that Bart Ehrman believes that there was a historical Jesus. He doesn't believe that there was a divinity.
If Alex is the incarnation of God, or Alice the incarnation of the devil, that's another question. I didn't know we were discussing theological claims.
You won't be debating me. I will frame it, and I hope you will frame it too, because you have the skills with AI, the AI skills, to be constantly using AI as the intermediary. AI is the debate. So you can then go on your thing and say, yeah, but doesn't that still leave the possibility that he was an initiate and he had this kind of experience, and even though it wasn't recorded. And then I can go into AI and say, that's not logically coherent with this source and this source. And then AI can come back and go, you're right, that isn't supported by the evidence. And then you can go in and try and change that. But ultimately, we'll get to a point like I've gotten to before. Like I told you with the Mark Kober, with the, there's no rabies, there's no virus, kind of.
That's
and you
chess
get to a
discussion.
point where it's kind of it's a chess discussion. It becomes kind of
rabies.
Kind of absurd, kind of like, okay, that someone can believe that the earth is flat, and that's okay. But the evidence, that's a very short AI discussion, because they'll just point out all the things all the technology that you have, what would it require for that to be true, and all the rest. I think the same is true on a lot of these things, and it's just that the human limitations are what keep it. It's the human ego, the human need to be agreeable and not be, have the social skills. If I tell you that's logically incoherent, people are going to hate me anyway. They already hate me, but they'll hate me even more from this interview, because I'm come across as being rude or obnoxious or whatever the hell it is, or know-it-all, whatever it is. It's like, God bless the dynamic changing with AI, where I want AI to play that role and just calmly, dispassionately say, no, that's bullshit. You can't say those two things together. They don't fit together.
Well, I mean, look, we can't dwell too much more on this because there's more to cover. I just want to say that I think we're going to revisit this in the future, actually. And so we'll get back to this point. I still don't get why you disagreed. That's okay. It's not important. I don't want to suffer the audience because those points weren't transferred right now. They've heard us lay out different perspectives, so I think we can wrap this sub-thread up and move on. I just want to add, though, as an aside, that when we discussed Jesus, that show was pretty popular, actually. I think, we discussed it at your show too last year. I think that was last year, or it was the year before. But in my show, that show came out, this year, and was one of the popular. Now, I want to say about my shows for this year, I see them now in a row here. And there's like 3 things I want to point out, according to what you said we could review. One is the UFO stuff. I've covered that a little because of all the UFO. By the way, we're in a huge UFO flap right now. There's a UFO crashed. Was it in New Jersey? There's a UFO who has come up from the sea. But that's just the anomalies. The norm, the default right now is UFOs just hovering there forever. No media is reporting on it, or local media is, but they still not reached the huge news. And there's helicopters chasing them. But people all over the world are boom, 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 uploading, and especially UK and USA, but even Moscow, etc. So that's very interesting. kind of, my first instinctive reaction is the deep state is trying to pull something because of the new administration. They're desperate. If they want to kill and go war and all that. Syria is another link in that. But
hey, just so happens that a lame duck president who's on his way out,
he's been
tried to start World War III by telling Zelensky to launch an interballistic missile that didn't have a nuclear warhead, but could have sparked a retaliation. Oh, God, this is back to the world that we've lived in for the last 40 years, right? Where it's like, you talk to, are you nuts? What kind of crazy idea? And then Syria, how long has Syria been on the list? Since 9/11, right? Here's the list. Iraq, Iran, Syria, Libya, Afghanistan. We're going to bring them all down. One by brought down. And then on his way out, kick Syria out the door too.
Indeed. There's a whole thing there. But anyway, the UFO thing I covered in the year that went by. The second thing I want to say that is noteworthy is that I got some big shots on. I got Jimmy Dore on. I got Whitney Webb on. I'm pretty stoked about that. Even Ralph Blumenthal, who most people maybe won't know who is, but old schoolers know, because he's like this New York Times big shot who broke the whole mainstream disclosure thing going on.
Yeah, who did he interview for that?
Who interview?
Blumenthal and Leslie Kean. Who was their source that they?
Yeah, you interviewed Leslie Kean. I interviewed
with?
Blumenthal. That's so funny.
I interviewed Blumenthal too. You don't remember who they interviewed, though?
I didn't know that.
Lou Elizondo.
Right.
But consider this, and pardon the numerous interruptions on your flow. But here's our history. It's like December 2017, I think. Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, New York Times, byline, front page, UFOs are real, right? Now we come to find out that their source for that, their secret source, whistleblower, Lou Elizondo. Lou Elizondo, as it turns out, is a intelligence officer.
Active.
Oh, no, he resigned. Actually, he resigned twice. We have a record of that.
But he's still receiving salary.
And they met in the Pentagon. Now, who do we know who's a whistleblower who reveals deep, deep secrets sitting in the Pentagon, where everything is recorded and bugged, and then doesn't face any reprisals? That's my point. What did Ralph Blumenthal do? He broke the story on UFOs, or he was fed story?
No, I think he and Kane were honest players, don't you? The source may have been, corrupt or whatever you want to say. The point is, it started something that was allowed to happen, or maybe it wasn't allowed, but it still happened anyway. And here we are, right, with the UFO Congress.
But Al, you're kind of totally bypassing your conspiracy first mentality. If the source is planted, then the story is planted, then they're only revealing what they wanted them to reveal, because that's our only thing that we can surmise from that, is that is not their agenda. It is someone else. So Lou Elizondo is not a true whistleblower. He's just delivering a message. And we've been through that.
And for some reason, they
years.
want to disclose more of the thing. And look, I think we both agree, and probably most listening, that there's no player involved in this thing going on is trying to get all of the truth out there. I don't think anyone believes that. So that means if they want this on the agenda, it means it's not the truth agenda that is the motivation here. There's some other reason why they want this topic cleaned up. Let's give it a new terminology. Let's start reporting on it more seriously. Let's start having politicians and hearings on this. There's another reason than truth that's going on. And in geopolitical glasses, it means they want to use this for something. Now, if they were sending out 1 million drones in the airspace, UFO drones, and they had not primed us already with this thing, they would risk too much. It would be more of the 1930s Orson Welles things going on, right? Hey, invaders, what the... But now that we've discussed it for 5 years, and there's more or less evidence, and even skeptics kind of agree that, they don't agree it's aliens, of course, but they kind of agree something's going on, then you can start using that phenomenon. And if the timeline has been bumped up now, because the deep state is losing power, because these brutes are coming in, right? The barbarians are coming into the castle. Ha! You know, speed up whatever agenda it is we have. Send them out there now as a desperate last resort. Because I think it's always been, I never think this is like our plan A. It's too risky. It's too messy. It's so many ramifications that they'd rather go on with close out, what's it called, like blackout that's been. So very interesting, the timing, right before the new administration. I think it could be connected to that actually. And in that case, these drones are very mundane. It's completely a deep state thing. Again, to all you alien ET folks, that's a completely different question. I don't think the ETs, if the ETs are amping up something now, that is even worse, because then it's related to the brink of the nuclear war, because we're way beyond the Bay of Pigs. So that's even worse, actually. I kind of like it if it's the deep state, because it reeks of desperation and they're never going to pull it off. Even mainstreamers know about this old conspiracy. What's it called? The one where they put a projection. Blue beam, yeah.
Blue beam.
So I don't know. I threw out some balls there. You want to comment upon it?
Well, what do you think about the exopolitical angle, which is where I always go and I never hear much of a dialogue about that?
I mean, if it's related to the exopolitical angle, then we have huge reason to be worried. It could be anything from the Anunnakis coming back and claiming, look, children, you're messing this thing up. Forget it. Cosmic fascism is back. Or it's like super tourism, because now, you know, it's been just increasing since the first nuclear war up until now. They know, because they don't come from a three-dimensional space. Now they're going to blow themselves up. You want to see this? You know, people are coming from all over to watch this. It's like when you and me go to a concert and we listen to the So Sprush, right? Dramatical music, bam, bam, bam. This is their leisure time. Look, they're blowing. Or even, let's intervene and stop them from blowing themselves up. Actually, that's not worse. Of course, I don't want it to go under in a nuclear holocaust. But it's still a huge game changer if it's something like that going on. And they're even allowing themselves to be... Look, they wouldn't just be shot down by a show. No, this is, if anything, a very human player. Not necessarily terrestrial, but a very human player. For some reason, flooding the world since December 3rd, which is very interesting. Cliff High, I was made aware of, said that free energy would be disclosed on December 3rd. Crazy of him to put a date on it like that. This is according to his Webbot stuff. No, so that's what I say about that. I don't want to go any further because we don't have enough data really to... It still can go anywhere, right? So let's wait and see. But you can speculate if you like.
The one thing I'd speculate about is that I think the exopolitical options always seem very limited in terms of how they're usually talked about. And I think there's a lot of evidence for multiple species, multiple political agendas. You know, how can we on one hand say all the data suggests that life is everywhere and there's millions and billions of planets, and then say, yeah, but it's the one particular species with one agenda that we have to... No, we just don't know. And, you know, I don't know if it was last year I had Bruce Fenton back on, but Bruce Fenton, I think, you know, I love that he's grounded in some data. It's like Star Wars can take a lot of different forms over the years from a lot of different groups and can make things look very differently, rather than this very narrow idea of what Eisenhower agreed to in some secret pact kind of thing. I mean, it could be a lot more complicated than that.
Fenton, by the way, is a guy I love to have on. The third thing is the election, because I flooded out 1 billion election shows like in the 12th hour. Now all the guests have all the rights to be annoyed with me, because when they make the shows, not Farrell, he knows, he doesn't even care. He knows it takes a year before that's out. But all the others, where the hell is the show? And then like 2 weeks before the election, I start floating them out like a maniac, which is why my website subscribers have been suffering. I apologize to that, making amends going forward. But no, I think that's the third significance. So on my end, Alex, it's the UFO shows, it's the big shots I got on, and then it's the election shows. That's one thing we had in common this year. We both floated out, released our election show with the same guest in the 12th hour. You want to talk a little about that? Let me start with saying this. I was so jealous, or is it envious, that's the right word, when I listened to your talk with him. Because I realized that, you know, sometimes it's an advantage that you're not too familiar with the guest's work. Sometimes it's a huge advantage. Usually it's the latter, but there's some approaches where the first can have an advantage. In this case, it's clearly an advantage to be familiar with all the questions you asked, and especially all the answers he gave you, were the next level compared to where I was tangoing with him. And it's exactly those things I would want to do for my show. It's like, fuck. And I can't even have him back now, because it's not going to be relevant until 4 years from now or 8 years from now. And anyway, you did it already. If you were like a completely unrelated show and no of my listeners were listening to yours, maybe then I could try to rehash an interesting forum level to that. But no, it's done. You did it. Kudos to you for that. You made it pretty interesting, actually. So I want to commend you for that show. But anyway, so we did that. Comment?
I thought your show was great with Dr. Andrew Paquette. So, no, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. And it just, I think it was the time gap a little bit, too, because Andrew changed over that last year because he did more media. And he was learning, throughout to not be totally inside baseball. What Andrew did, which is so remarkable, but it's very, very difficult to explain quickly, is the voting records in the United States are, I don't know how they are in Norway, but I'd imagine they'd be the same, but they are publicly available, not in terms of who you vote for, but the fact that you are a registered voter. That is public information, so it's accessible by Freedom of Information requests. And it's not always easy to get because those different groups have political infighting. They don't want to give it to certain people, so they make it hard to get it and all this. Anyways, Andrew gets the database. And from the database of all these records, millions of records, he discovers a pattern of fraud, a pattern of deception, a pattern of duplicate records, cloned records. And because it's discovered algorithmically, there can really be no doubt. There is no doubt. Statistically, the odds chance are in the trillions. Because if you take 100,000 records and you say, if I sort them in this super special way that they were never intended to be sorted, like state ID versus county ID, they should have no relationship. They're assigned ostensibly, supposedly, they're assigned by two different agencies for two different, completely different persons. But if I sort by that, and then I also sort by, registration date, then it just so happens that I get all these duplicate records. And only then do I get all the duplicate records. Well, that's, from a statistical standpoint, you can calculate that right out. I can't, but AI could. And it's, again, that gets into back into the nitty-gritty of AI is like, well, did it really come up with anything new and novel, or was it just reconstituting what was already there? It's also better than what some of the best experts would do. That was my point way back in the interview with Bernardo. The insights that AI had, on one hand, you could say, were consistent with the data that was already there, but really put them together in a new and novel way that Bernardo had not considered. To me, that's building on the database. But anyways, back to Andrew, what an achievement, what an incredible achievement to be able to demonstrate kind of conclusively voter fraud at that scale, a deep state voter fraud. It's deep state is controlling and then the analogy that I like is it's like discovering a secret door in the back of your bank vault. Well, so a lot of people focus on the fact that, well, you can't prove that they ever stole any money.
But the fact that there's a secret door there is illegal in itself. He's uncovered illegalities,
Correct.
whether they, right? So that's the whole point. But anyway, go on.
Well, it's really this deeper point of it connects to so many things that we're talking about. Because that point right there about the secret door in the back of the bank vault connects with what we've lived through the last 40 years in terms of just these kind of bold-faced bullshit lies. You're like, who would believe, who would, be? And then we found out that, if that gets repeated enough by mainstream media and other sources enough, people wind up parroting that and go, yeah, but there's no proof. There's no proof of election fraud. You want to go, there's a freaking secret door in the back of the bank. Yeah, but you can't prove. You're like, you're missing the point here, And that, I think, relates to my point about AI truth. AI comes out, if AI becomes a reliable player in kind of logically analyzing this, AI is actually the one who came up with that analogy, by the way. Wow. I fed the whole thing into AI, and AI said, that's like having so I think AI would come and say, no, it would just, again, in this kind of very, AI is good at kind of couching things in kind of more agreeable way. But he's like, no, that's total nonsense. This is illegal. You can't have this. It really doesn't matter if you can, proving that it was used to throw an election is a separate legal issue that needs to be addressed separately. But the fact that it exists and it was done in a way to intentionally obfuscate, this criminal activity is then that really, I think, in a very important way, and I think in the future will just become, people will just go like, how do you argue with that? Yeah. Well, go argue with it. Go into Claude, go into ChatGPT and argue with it. But
in addition, he also shows that this is related to the immigration thing, because the voter fraud thing, because I've always said, no, it's election fraud. Voter fraud, it's insignificant. There's always going to be maniacs trying to, but what he shows is a relationship between those two things. He shows that the reason, it's not voter fraud that the voters themselves are doing it, but it's election fraud using voter fraud. So we need those people. Now, if 1 million people came in and tried to cheat, that's the classical voter fraud thing. That's not what's going on. It's 1 million people coming in and then the system using that as, so in an analogy, it's like, and now half the people working in the bank, with the bank vote, they are coming from a company called Crime Incorporated. Or they're coming from a competition. Suddenly they are working here. And the second analogy I want to add to show the ramifications of what uncovered is that the value of your money in the vault, you get an annual report. Now you had 1 billion last year. This year you just have 500 million. What happened here? No, it's inflation. What I'm trying to point at is, if it seems like someone is going to get 59% of the votes and then they come out getting 45%, it was, people changed their mind. That's like saying the value of your less money is because the money is worth less. It's all these things, and it's brilliant what he's been doing. But I think we can disclose that Tucker Carlson is aware of this thing. Jerome Corsi is aware of this thing. I think I heard him say even Trump. It's been discussed at Mar-a-Lago. So that means this thing won't go on forever. And I heard him say to you in your last interview that he thought they amped down this election because there was awareness. They didn't risk it for Kamala. They had to risk it for Trump last time. And they got, 20 million extra voters. But they couldn't do it so much this time. And I think probably that's one of the reasons we saw that. I think the real number is probably like 60. 40, because we know they can sway about 10%.
That's your Epstein interview, right?
Not Epstein. Don't say Epstein. You're going to insult him. His name is Epstein, whereas the Mossad guy is Epstein. So yeah, I got him on, and but that's in addition to what I'm talking about. He's talking about influencing hearts and minds, which is rigging. We are talking here about cheating, which is two different mechanisms.
Well, I was just saying, I agree with you on the 60-40 at least, but I think you get there when you add in Epstein's, which you should go over that. That was a fantastic interview, and I learned a lot, but I have a bunch of questions about that one too that we'll talk about at some point. But tell people about that. It's amazing.
I mean, that's one of the things we maybe don't have to talk so much about, because I didn't dig him up from out of nowhere. He's been everywhere, and they've heard him talk. There was some new stuff I would venture in my show, but you can go to Jimmy Dore, you can go to Joe Rogan, you can go to anyone who's had him on and hear the same thing. I don't know if we need to muse about it, or...
Yeah, but I thought you did a really good job, and you developed a really good rapport with him that I thought was excellent. And like I pointed out to you, you were talking about Iceland, and then, as a country that could potentially...
How can I say this without betraying his confidence? There was one other thing. He was so grateful to me for... In fact, I had to go back and edit out a portion of the show because of that. He was saying something that wasn't to his benefit in terms of... Well, let's just say it wasn't to his benefit, and I made him aware of that. And I said that you cannot do this when you're interviewed. And he was just... What an honest guy. He was like, you know what? I have never thought of that, and I can see what you mean, and you're completely right. Can we delete this thing? Yes. And now I'm going to go forward following your advice. I feel so happy about that, because I love the guy, because I love the work he does. And I think I now contributed actually to a good thing there. So I just want to brag a little about that. Now, when we come to Skeptiko, like I said, 90%, 95% of your stuff is AI this year. But you have gone old school too this year. At least a couple of shows are registered where you're going back to the roots. What's up with that? It wasn't even an angle to legitimate it.
Well, I don't know about you, but the process of booking people is a combination of reaching out and being reached out to, So, when people that I really admire or like or I'm interested in reach out to me, then I'm open to having them on. And, sometimes so that's Alex Gomez-Marin was excellent, but we did talk a little bit about AI, but mainly about science. Reverend Howard Storm, I thought was just really pretty amazing. He's a NDE, very famous in the NDE community for being a Christian pastor who was converted to Christianity from atheism by his near-death experience. So, and then there's...
Yeah, this woman about consciousness, pretty recent show, I think.
Who now has canceled me. That's okay.
There's a story there. Let's hear.
No, the story is the same with, it is the AI story that I'm talking about, because people do not like to have their beliefs challenged. And that is a very human kind of thing that I think is, the reason why we need AI. That is not a valid reason to not go forward with trying to discover what is true. If this truth is tied to spirituality, which I think it is, then there's no reason to, not move forward, because I'm afraid, my beliefs will be challenged in a way that makes me look bad.
Right. Yeah, that's an ego thing, actually. I don't think you mind being challenged if the challenge is valid. At least that's my view on this. It's annoying when, like, for example, when I went on Sam, I read some of the comments.
Right.
How can I say this without insulting good Sam? He's a great person, but some of his followers, sometimes I realize you and me are spoiled when you look at the level of our followers. But I guess that's because we don't have as many followers as someone like Sam. But when I read
Right.
some level of the criticism coming, they didn't even listen to the goddamn show. What the fuck is the matter with you guys?
Right.
It's like this. Where did this gang of apes come in from? I'm talking about certain percentage here, and I guess that comes with the territory when you get a lot of listeners. So that annoys me, because it's just like, if you just listen properly or understand what we're saying, this wouldn't even be an issue. So that annoys me. And yeah, of course it's human, but it's rational, I think, to be annoyed by that. But I think if we are really truth seekers, then we should be able to be open to new data. But we have to understand it, and there has to be a good reason, right? You can't just opinionate based on an emotion. And I think that's what makes your show kind of stand out. I think also yeah, you're right. There's only once or twice I've been thinking about you that, now you're being rude. I mean, yeah, you're often quote unquote rude, but usually you are rude because a real rude person attacks a person. You're just talking, you're not attacking a person. It's not a personal attack. You're discussing something, a very brutish way to get your point across, but you're still having your eyes on the ball, not on the person. So that's why it's completely okay that you sometimes can seem insensitive. But I do think that your friend, because he is a friend, and that's probably why you can afford doing it, Castro, is very patient with you. Because last time I felt you were interrupting without him getting to address. It felt like you wanted to get your points across so much that he didn't really always get the chance to address it. So this is the first time I've been annoyed with your interruptions and your rudeness. But I'm happy he wasn't, though. I've never been it when we've been talking, and you've been hard with me too. But always within the purview of the data, right? But that's my point. So if we are truth seekers, we should be able to handle that and at least let it go after the moment, right? You can even legitimate that kind of approach if you are really truth seekers. And I think 1% are truth seekers in this space. It sounds like we're bragging about ourselves now, but because I'm a truth seeker, I have to be honest and say this, right? Even if it means that we are coming out looking good. You understand?
Yeah, I'm so deeply rooted in the idea that we need to seek out the truth. And I guess I can have kind of a short fuse when I see the same patterns emerging. In particular, just logical inconsistencies and failings that resonate with all the stuff we've talked about for 40 years that we get so mad about.
My first question to you is, do you think that the new administration will be, let's start there, because all other predictions comes from there. Will they be allowed to take over, or will something happen that kind of stops that?
Again, we were both so wrong on this. I'd say that there is so much momentum behind what they're doing that I think it's kind of like we were talking about in that other situation with the election. There is a point of no return in terms of the forces that are against this to risk kind of totally blowing up in their face. They can't do that either. It might be strategically, at least, more of a plan for them to now kind of sit back, reconsolidate their position, and attack again. But to do a frontal attack on what's happening right now, I just don't think it happens because it's not strategic. What do you think on that?
I think they only have two. They're never going to give up. They're going to die before they give up. But they have two venues now. And I'm not even sure they agree with each other about which one to do. Number one, I don't know if I understood you correctly, but you may have alluded to this, is that instead of a frontal attack now, the rats are going to go into his ship. And they're going to start. So it's going to be an internal attack. And you see it already with some of the people he's got on board. They have tentacles now into. But again, then we don't know how conscious is Trump of this. How much is he playing them? To a certain extent, he has to put some of the powers players in. He can't just, come with a bunch of. We're taking over this Viking ship, but it's only Ethiopians gonna work on this ship. No, so that's one thing. And how much can he withstand the internal? So that's. And that's what I hope will happen, actually, because it's all better for us. Even if they just move the dial 10%, it's still going to be much better than where we were. The second, and that's the bad one, is like this. Okay, if we can't rule this ship, nuclear war, alien invasion, but when the economy come crashing down, you better be sure you end up on top of it, and you don't come down to our level, because we need people like you. Because money is power, right? So they have artificially postponed the whole fucking collapse just because, and they have to do it. If it collapses in Biden's administration, it's going to forever in the history book be that it was there. But even if it happens like 2 days after Trump takes over, they're going to blame him because people aren't sophisticated enough to understand how this works, right? So yeah, the economy, the nuclear, or the metaphysical approach, the UFO, one of those could be at least that faction who still want to do a frontal attack. What do you think?
I hate to go there, but you're right. I mean, you're right. I don't know if you're right, but I agree with you that the psychopathic nature of these people just cannot be underestimated. And when people do underestimate it, I'm always like, what are you thinking? What you've just seen? You need any more evidence of what they're capable of? So I think you're spot on that. And that leads to your point number 2. Yeah, they'll do anything. I think there's a lot of other options that are out there. You know, we still don't know what brought down Building 7, but there's some advanced weaponry out there. You know, you've covered that on the Antarctica thing and the Nazi thing. I don't know if it plays exactly the way that you're doing, but I think you bring some really good piece of evidence to the table. Then we don't know the exopolitical angle. Like I said, it could be much, much more complex than has been portrayed to us. There can be a lot of dealings with a lot of different groups, with a lot of different agendas.
What if... I think that people thinking this, it's not a huge thing. It's something I've entertained from now and then. Because unlike you, I mean, you're in a position, it's not too much of a disclosure to say that you're married to a psychologist, right? And she's exploring that kind of mental space, psychopaths and stuff. But to us mortals, I kind of often think, like so many do, that how can people be so insanely evil and just... So what if, yes, of course there's evil, yes, there's psychopaths, but what if it's not that widespread? What if there's so many people who have a knife on their throat? And, you know, like they talk about the blackmail thing is one of them, right? But let's say it's much deeper. Let's say that knife is cosmic. Let's say they have a cosmic knife on their throat. And this insane agenda taking over isn't concocted by greedy mortal players. It's something bigger going on, right? Something evil. I mean, now we're almost sounding like Tom DeLonge here, but he didn't invent this view. It's always been there, and it's a rational one, and even Richard Dolan had that very early on. We have to entertain that as a factor too, and that could explain some of the things going on in terms of the UFO flap and the disclosures and all that.
I think that's such an interesting point. And you don't necessarily have to go UFO there, because we don't understand what the demonic evil realm is all about and how it intersects or doesn't intersect with, you know, other species and other visitors and stuff like that. But you know what I found very interesting? A woman I interviewed a long time ago with the Why Evil Matters book that I wrote is Annika Lucas. And I thought, I've referenced her so many times because she was kind of transformational in communicating this idea that we just have to deal with the fact that there's evil. Annika Lucas her mother was a psychopath and schizophrenic, and sold her into sex slavery when she was 6 years old. And she actually reveals more about how that was done. You know, imagine she would get Annika up in the middle of the night and say, okay, get ready. And then they take her over to the castle of, you know, where all these prime ministers, and she names names. She goes, that guy from Belgium, that guy from Spain, that guy, you know, from the United States. She names a Rockefeller
Nazi
in this
International.
interview. And, she says how many hundreds and hundreds of times she was raped as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old. And ritualistically. And so here you got opening a door to those other realms that you're talking about. It's like, what is, I love the way you put it, what knife do they have on the throat of those people beyond the blackmail? Because so many times that discussion, that's the wonderful thing about what you do on Forum Borealis, because of your background and your understanding, is so many times those discussions stop with the blackmail from, right? And it's like, no, bro, why were they doing the rituals? Why were they doing the satanic stuff? Why were they of a belief that they could access these extended consciousness realms? And now we know that those extended consciousness realms exist because we know, like, near-death experience exists, out-of-body experience exists, ET exists. So now that which was the barrier, we say, oh, that stuff, don't ever listen to that. Oh, just go listen to Christoph Koch, and he's got a good, nice little, very nice wrapped-up model of neurological model. Your brain is everything you are. When that falls apart, now you got to wonder, what is the knife on the throat of that guy who's raping that 6-year-old kid from a spiritual level?
Right. Yeah, I can't add anything to that because that's an open question, which is important to keep in mind. No, I really want to listen to that Annika Lucas interview at PBD. But we reached, but anyway, so wait, let us complete the question. So you don't want to take a venture of if the administration is allowed to take over, because that's just the first of a domino of predictions.
I think some of the things will be effective and will make a change. I think there's just too much momentum to stop that. In the same way we were talking about with big tech, it's like, no, Google, business as usual just isn't going to be sustainable economically from a business standpoint.
Unless they do a dramatic out of the left field reset, it's going to be allowed, and they're going to continue as within the new system. But it will have ramification for censorship.
We're already there. The amount of information that we can get on all the platforms, and all you need is one. Like X is unbelievable. You can get anything on X. And that's so mainstream. Of course you can get anything on Rumble, but it's kind of a hassle. I just think, and then, no, I think that's kind of not even an issue. Somebody has to tell me what they can't get out there that they're dying to get.
The standard is that anything can be available anywhere. And it's up to you.
I don't exactly agree with the standard. Like when we were talking about the Nazi stuff, and we'll talk more about the Nazi stuff, I kind of challenged you when you said, oh, there's all this stuff on Borman, And I said, Al, it's out there. It's already in. We were talking about AI. I said, AI already knows all that stuff. And I think that I was kind of vindicated that there wasn't a lot that you could pull out that you pump into AI, and AI says, oh my God, that's not true. I don't know anything about it. It goes, I know this, I know this, I know this. And maybe you can fill in some of the gaps.
It's not that it says, I never heard of the bell. What it will say is, no, this is conspiracy, this is rumor, it's not documented, it's not an established view. That's what annoys me with AI when we come to these things. This kind of illustrates everything we've been talking about today as far as AI goes. It sorts the information to me, it presents it back in a new and better way. It finds readily available all the answers without me having to read through every single book, in the old days, page 4, page 5. It's such a great tool. And it even ventures estimation, and that estimation changes when I start asking it, because it's still, we can disclose that it's connected to Google. So it conclusions changed when I fed it. I'm going to do the same with Jesus, okay? Maybe we can have a show about that. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Sure.
But I have to say, in terms of AI, whose lap I'm sitting most on these days? ChatGPT. I'm all the way back to ChatGPT now. Because for my use, I don't know what the hell you're doing with, what sex games you're playing with your AI lover. But for my sex games, It's better. I found out the best one is ChatGPT. I've tried, you know how I've been changing lovers all the time, right? Now I'm back at ChatGPT. Of course, I wish I could clean its mind, but no, I'm happy to. I send you stuff, you send me. You're probably going to send me a new and better one soon. The development is there. I'm looking forward to see what your friend Castro is going to do there. I heard he is starting one. And Braxman, let's give a shout out for Braxman. Folks, go to I don't know what his YouTube channel is called. Maybe it is Braxman, but I've joined his community. Great stuff on privacy and all that. It really, and he explains how, and he's going to launch a complete. This is what Alex said in one of his first AI shows. He discussed with some dude, naive dude, who thought that we need a centralized AI controlled by Musk or something, and just so naive. Just a centralized AI that's not having an agenda. Won't happen, man. Alex said, no, everybody should have one in their own computer. It should be a decent. This is coming. Braxman is making one. And I'm going to get it. And that means, folks, that you can feed. If you are, AI is always going to be biased, but you can bias it, meaning it will do your bidding. It will be most useful for you. So I'm going to have an AI who tells me everything about Nazis and Jesus and whatever else. Right? And then there's the functionality that they all have together. They all have that, no matter how brainwashed and manipulated they are. They're always going to have the unsurpassed functionality, which we all can benefit from. Last word to you, bro.
Okay. Well, it's been awesome as usual. Let's wrap it there, but put a big to be continued.
See you in a year. And bam.